The air is still, unnaturally still. In a clearing bordered by ancient cypress trees, a massive shape emerges from the shadows. A Tyrannosaurus rex. It is not roaring, it is watching, it is calculating. Across the clearing, its target, a bull triceratops, holds the line. The herbivore lowers its massive head, flushing blood into its frill, creating a wall of bone and horn. This is not a chaotic clash of monsters. It is a cold, silent negotiation of power. It is a contest between nature's perfect weapon and its perfect shield. To understand the violence of this arena, we must first understand the world that built it. Open the dossier on Hell Creek. Code name, the final battlefield. The location is the American West, spanning what will one day be Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. Chronology is specific. The final hour. We are in the late Maastrichtian stage of the Cretaceous period. The clock has started ticking just 2 million years before the end. This is the absolute edge of the cliff. But forget the dry, dusty badlands you see in museums today. Erase that image. We must see the late Maastrichtian as it truly was. The planet is in a state of flux. It is a greenhouse world. Warm and humid, but it is slowly cooling. Sea levels are high, but they are beginning to fall. This global tension creates a new geography. To the east, the Great Western Interior Seaway, the massive inland ocean that once split North America in two, is retreating. As it pulls back, it leaves behind a vast, saturated coastal floodplain. This is Hell Creek. It is not a jungle and it is not a desert. It is a subtropical lowland expanse, a waterlogged labyrinth crisscrossed by meandering rivers, oxbow lakes, and dense dark forests. Imagine the air. It is thick, heavy with humidity, and the pungent smell of wet cypress and decaying leaves. It is a landscape that is simultaneously rich with life and fraught with danger. As the seaway retreated, it created a vacuum. This new land became the ultimate proving ground, drawing life from all corners of the continent. This concentration of resources created a concentration of fighters. It was a paradise, yes, but it was a paradise built on a powder keg. However, in this arena, the dinosaur was not the only danger. The environment itself was an antagonist. The weapons of this world were not just teeth or claws, they were the earth and the flora. Walk with me through these forests. They are dense with familiar shapes, sycamores, palms, and ferns. But something is changing. This was the dawn of a new dynasty, the angiosperms, the flowering plants. This was an evolutionary revolution. As these new plants fought for dominance, they developed chemical defenses, poisons and complex toxins unseen by older herbivore lineages. For a browsing Edmontosaurus or a low-grazing Ankylosaurus, every meal was a gamble. The forest was a botanical minefield where the food itself could fight back. If the flora was the first weapon of the arena, the second was water. The rivers of Hell Creek were lifelines. They acted as highways for massive crocodilians and giant fish. They were magnets for thirsty herds, but they were also impartial killers. The climate here was highly seasonal, dictated by a violent cycle of drought and deluge. The rivers were not placid streams, they were chaotic beasts. During the storm seasons, they became raging, muddy torrents capable of flash flooding entire forests in a matter of hours. The fossil record tells a grim story. We find log jams of bones, mixed collections of predators and prey, caught together, drowned together, and buried in the mud. The true ruler of Hell Creek was not a dinosaur, but the chaotic, unpredictable river system itself. Fighters living here, life was a story written in two acts: the wet season and the dry season. First, the deluge. Season was a time of suffocating abundance. The floodplain would swell, and the world dissolved into a confusing network of swamps and temporary islands. For the massive Tyrannosaurs or the herds of Hadrosaurs, this meant forced migration. The rising water compressed all terrestrial life onto small strips of high ground. It forced rivals into unwilling proximity. Predators like Tyrannosaurus benefited immensely from this compression. The arena shrank, the prey was trapped, and the hunt became easier. Then, the pendulum swung back. The dry season. This was a trial by fire. The rivers receded, leaving behind stagnant, algae-choked ponds. The lush vegetation withered into brittle husks. This was the great filter. Herds had to travel miles, exposed and vulnerable, just to find water. The young, the old, and the sick were the first to fall. This is where the concept of the nest became the ultimate gamble. Consider the mother Triceratops. She had to choose her nesting site with the foresight of an engineer. If she built her nest too close to the river, the wet season floods would drown her eggs in cold mud. If she built too far away, the dry season heat would bake them before they could hatch. Survival here meant mastering the calendar, anticipating the chaos of the sky. This relentless seasonal pressure is what perfected the fighters of Hell Creek. It demanded resilience. It demanded strength. It demanded that every biological weapon be absolutely flawless. Into this crucible stepped the most advanced animals of the Mesozoic era. The roster of this arena is legendary. First, the hunter, Tyrannosaurus rex. In Hell Creek, the T-Rex was not just a scavenger or a simple predator. It was the apex, the keystone of the entire system. By this point in evolution, it had become a biological machine designed for one purpose: total domination. Its binocular vision, its terrifying sense of smell, and a bite force capable of crushing solid bone shaped the evolution of everything it hunted, and the hunted evolved to match him. The ecosystem responded with two perfect defensive solutions. Enter Triceratops horridus, the rival. This animal was a living fortress of muscle and horn. When faced with a Tyrannosaur, it did not run. It held the line. Its entire anatomy was a keep-out sign. The massive frill protected the neck. The brow horns were spears, waiting for a mistake. And then there was Ankylosaurus magniventris, the tank. If Triceratops was a shield, Ankylosaurus was a landmine. Heavily armored, low to the ground, and armed with a tail club that could shatter a predator's leg, it represented a strategy of mutually assured destruction. This unique combination, the planet's deadliest hunter living alongside its most indestructible prey, is what makes Hell Creek iconic. Their struggle was the engine that drove the entire ecosystem. But this arena, this perfect engine of survival, was living on borrowed time. Its greatness is also its tragedy. Hell Creek's fossil record is unique in the history of the world. It does not fade out. It does not slowly dwindle. It stops. The geological boundary is marked by a thin, dark line, a layer of clay and ash, rich in iridium, an element rare on Earth but common in asteroids. The legacy of Hell Creek is that it preserves the world right up to the final second. It is a snapshot of the Dinosaurian Golden Age, taken just moments before the lights went out. We see these perfect fighters, these masters of their arena, at the very peak of their power. They were not sick. They were not dying out. They were thriving. And then, silence. The fossils vanish. The struggle ends. The great battlefield falls quiet. Forever. Hell Creek was the ultimate proving ground. It was the final brutal crucible of the Dinosaurian age. It forged the strongest hunters and the toughest rivals. It was the stage for the last act of a 160 million year dynasty. The arena itself was the true main character, a world that demanded perfection and punished any weakness. Now, a final question for you. When you look back at this lost world, what defines the legacy of Hell Creek? Is it the weapons of the fighters it forged, or is it the tragedy of the world it preserved? Whose survival chronicle should we reconstruct next? Nominate a new paleontological record in the comments below.